Hello, good morning. This is Professor JPS, and today is March 26th, 2020. This is for Communication Arts 154, Introduction to Film Studies. And today I will be discussing some leftover aspects of the film The Hours and its relationship to British acting style and method acting style. And then also in this particular lecture, we'll be discussing Chapter 9, Writing, and then discussing the film that I picked to illustrate some very good writing, the film Citizen Ruth, which, again, all the films are available on Amazon Prime and some other places. And as I mentioned in my mass emails, I can't make you pay for them. Some of them I think are free on Amazon, but most of them are $3.99. But if there's ways in which you can find the films, please go. And I hope you can start sending me some screening sheets from last week's The Hours. I haven't received many of those. Just send them to me in a Word document attachment for the screening sheets. But please, most important, to stay in touch with email. Please go to your NCC email. Okay, that's very important. If you haven't, try to link your NCC email to your personal email. I think it's pretty easily done through Banner or through Outlook or through the NCC webpage. You can do so, but everybody has an NCC email, and that's what I have to send. My mass emails have to be sent that way. Anyway, I want to discuss aspects of the film The Hours. Now, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it, please make sure that you do. But these are the sort of main ideas and the main points. As I tried to describe in last week's video, the film takes place over 3 different eras, as it were. One is about a real person, Virginia Woolf, who Nicole Kidman played, and the 2 other people are fictional characters. One is a 1950s housewife who feels very, very unhappy with her life and unsure about her own sensuality and sexuality. And then the Meryl Streep character is someone who has a kind of feeling of tragedy in terms of a sense of connection and love with a man who's very, very unhappy. And they're all connected in some way because of the Virginia Woolf book. Virginia Woolf writes the book called Mrs. Dalloway, and she ends up killing herself. And then because she has some mental illness, and then you have the 50s housewife played by Julianne Moore, who is just can't quite understand her own role in her own life. She feels as though she's had gone from being someone's daughter to someone's wife and someone's mother without a real sense of her own identity. And this is just prior to the kind of third wave feminist movement that asks women to think about their own identities beyond just being someone's daughter or someone's wife or someone's mother. And the Meryl Streep character, who is more contemporary, although contemporary for the time when the film was made, in the 90s and 2000s, someone who's stricken with a good deal of unhappiness, but also intelligent. In terms of the acting chapter, like we talked about last week, the British acting style and the method acting style. The British acting style relies more on externals. In other words, the costumes, accents, makeup, a very, very large, elaborate feeling of make-believe. But ostensibly the same person who's pretending to be another person makes up the idea of the British acting style. And the method acting style is much more tapped into a kind of psychological connectivity to the character itself. The method actor would not just put on makeup. I mean, sometimes they do put on makeup. They don't completely dismiss makeup, but they would not put on makeup solely as the way in which to try to be the character. For instance, Robert De Niro, when he played a boxer, Jake LaMotta, who was a middleweight champion, Robert De Niro put himself in very, very good shape and looked like the real thing. And then he played the man later in life, when he played the character who aged later in life and got a big belly, Robert De Niro didn't wear padding. He just gained 60 pounds to do it. So you could see his gut hanging out over his belly. That's real commitment to the particular film. I think you see one particular character who adheres much more to the British acting style. And you see another character who adheres much more to the method acting style. And you see the third character who's kind of a combination of the two, it would seem to me. Now, it seems pretty evident that the Nicole Kidman character is someone who's utilizing the British acting style. And that's not just because she's playing someone who's British. That's just a strange coincidence. I assume you know that Nicole Kidman is Australian. She is. And she's playing a real British person, Virginia Woolf. But Nicole Kidman is almost unrecognizable in her makeup and her false nose that she's wearing. Nicole Kidman has red hair in real life. Her hair is made to be this sort of dishwater brown in the film. She has little ink marks all over her fingers. She's utilizing a British accent, which is different than an Australian accent and Australian accent. She's using all the bells and whistles of what's called British acting style, external things on the outside, to make her more convincing as Virginia Woolf. She's de-glamorized completely. I mean, Nicole Kidman, I think you could say, is objectively a lovely, beautiful woman. And in the film, all sense of any kind of Hollywood glamour is given over to these external demonstrations of an acting style that shows a kind of putting on a trench coat, so to speak. I mean, not literally a trench coat, but putting on this idea of an outfit to then pretend to be to be Virginia Woolf. It's much more adherent to the British acting style than, say, method. Now, not that Nicole Kidman isn't a decent actress and good actress, and maybe she would consider herself doing method, but just in terms of the surface level understanding of Virginia Woolf as acted by Nicole Kidman, because of the externalities. The Meryl Streep character, however, is someone who's much more adhering to the method acting style. Here is someone who is trying very, very hard to help someone she really cares about, in terms of her idea of the Ed Harris character who's dying. She loves this person dearly. Now, this film might be a bit confusing for our kind of heteronormative boy loves girl or girl loves girl or straight or gay or bisexual, whatever. I mean, the film is a bit unclear. I mean, Meryl Streep has a daughter, but she also has a lesbian lover, and then she loves this other man dearly, and he's actually homosexual himself. There's a lot of kind of fluidity between the idea of heterosexual and homosexuality in the film, but it's not a film about sex, as it were. It's a film about identity. I think that's in some ways what is different about the movie. And the Streep character, she feels a very, very strong connection to the Ed Harris character that isn't necessarily sexualized. And I think that we're so used to seeing in romantic films that people are connecting on a lust or sensual or sexual level. This film is a little different along those lines. It's a little old in terms of and a little bit more mature than I think that most 20-year-olds will see. But that's kind of what I'm trying to get across. She feels a deep connection to this Ed Harris character, and she goes back a long way with the Ed Harris character, and she feels like she knows him and wants to help him as best as possible. And the sequence where she literally falls down onto the ground describing her past and describing the pain that comes from that particular past is a very moving piece of acting. And I don't care what anybody says, Meryl Streep deserves the reputation that she has. That is a very, very good illustration of the internal coming out as opposed to the external coming in. And the method acting style that Streep deploys in that particular film is very moving. It's very powerful. Even if you don't quite understand it, it reaches you on an emotional level. And Streep was someone who really exemplified the method acting style quite well, because it's all very deeply connected to her own psychological needs and her own psychological sensibilities. And Streep, the actress, could not have done that and then had the director yell cut and then just walk off and have lunch and talk about her day, because she is internalizing the psychological pain of that particular character. And that's the difference. Not that Streep is better or worse than Kidman, not that British acting style is better or worse. It's really a question of choice. It's really a question of apples and oranges. But just in terms of assessing acting, you could suggest that Streep is definitely displaying the method acting style because of her deep, deep connection psychologically to that particular character, emotional sensibility. And Kidman, although she's emotional and kind of demonstrating someone who's a bit psychologically damaged, all the externalities change the Nicole Kidman being into a kind of costume of the famous writer Virginia Woolf. And I think that those two distinct styles are demonstrated quite nicely in this film. The other interesting part, it seems to me, is that the Julianne Moore character is kind of a combination in between the two. I think that there's some fluidity between the two styles. It's not just only and mutually exclusive British and or method. I think that there's some play, some fluidity, some give and take between the two styles. And I think the Julianne Moore character, the unhappy housewife who's not sure of her own sensibilities, her own sexuality, her own place, her own identity, and where she feels, where the character seems, or the actress seems to be deploying a bit of British acting style, are again in the externals. The kind of hair and makeup that was suitable for 1950s American housewife, the lipstick, the way in which she's has her kitchen just so, the way in which she's trying to feel as though feel her way through her own lack of identity, but her own emotional sensibilities, when she's crying a bit, when she's looking slightly crazed, looking a little disconnected, when she has that friend over and tries to kiss her. It's that, to some degree, is a little bit of the method acting style. So I think that the fluidity between the two is really best exemplified in the Julianne Moore character, because she's not wholly British acting style and she's not wholly method acting style. She's borrowing from both sides of the street, so to speak. So also in terms of the film is, in terms of its mise en scène, in terms of its elements of filmmaking, I think the best aspect of this particular film, there's three that are really, really strong. Obviously, the acting. I mean, it's an actor's film, first and foremost. I mean, and I think that everything I just said in the past 13 minutes or so tries to get at that idea that the film is an acting triumph of. It's a triumph of three different actresses who are really carrying the movie. But the way in which the movie is served to the audience in a clever way by the director is the way in which the film is edited. The film is edited very carefully to move from all three sections without overloading one section into the other. It's very, very cleverly utilized, cleverly edited from the Virginia Woolf character to the 50s housewife character to the more contemporary character. You're never in one place for too long and too overloaded and too bored. You move briskly. Once you get a sense of what's happening in one section, you're off to the other section. And that's editing. That's the very, very well-placed editing, well-timed editing, to give the film a certain degree of rhythm. Now, again, this is not a Marvel film. This is not a film that has a lot of bells and whistles for 19, 20-year-olds who are used to seeing movies that are much more explosive. This film is much more quiet and contemplative. It's more of an adult-themed, mature-themed film. But, too bad. It's just a movie, and what I'm showing it for is acting. But so the acting is very, very good, and the editing is very, very clever. and also the musical score. The musical score is very contemplative, and excuse me. The musical score is very contemplative, and it helps move the editing. Excuse me. It helps move the editing along quite briskly. The music is somber, but not totally sad. The music is bouncy, but not happy. The music is a kind of, it's a quickening kind of pace, the musical score. It has a kind of, if I knew more about musical terms, I would give them to you, but it's a kind of musical score that makes you pay attention, but doesn't interrupt. It helps to perpetuate the three different storylines, quite move the character's sense of somberness and seriousness along. It's a well-placed musical score. Also, generally speaking, the lighting in the film is relatively dark to cohere to the darkness of the story. It's not a bouncy, vibrant, colorful film. It's a much more somber, muted tone cinematographically. Okay, so keep those things in mind. If you haven't seen it, please make sure you get a chance to see it. It's a really moving story, and just try your best to get a sense of how the acting chapter coheres to the three different actresses, because they're really quite good at it. And obviously, the film, in terms of context, is a feminist film. It's a film that, even though it's very sad, and even though it's contemplative and adult, it's really a story about women and the responsibilities and sadness that comes with the history of being female in Western culture. And I think that has a kind of feminist viewpoint, even though that has a kind of sad sensibility. Okay. All right. This is part one. I will take a quick break and then come back and discuss the writing chapter, chapter 9, and discuss what I think are the key elements of chapter 9 writing, and then also get at what is today's film, so to speak, Citizen. So please stay safe. Please stay safe. Please make sure that when you leave the house, that you're washing your hands as soon as you come back, as soon as you get back to your car, okay? Okay, it says my connection is unstable. Let's see. All right, it said my connection was unstable for a moment there. Please stay safe, and I'll be back in just a little bit.